The rain hammered against the windows of Lincoln High School as students rushed through the hallways, their voices echoing off the polished floors. Among them walked a girl who seemed ordinary at first glance. SAI carried her books close to her chest, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore plain jeans and a navy blue sweater that had seen better days. Nothing about her appearance suggested she was anything more than another teenager starting at a new school. But Sarah Martinez was far from ordinary. At 17, she held one of the most classified positions in the United States military. She was Base Admiral Sarah Martinez, commander of the most advanced naval intelligence facility on the East Coast. Her cover story was perfect. A military family had moved to town, and their daughter was enrolling in the local high school to finish her senior year. What nobody knew was that the military family was entirely fictional, created by the Pentagon to provide the perfect cover for their youngest and most brilliant operative. The decision to place Sarah in high school hadn't been made lightly. Intelligence reports indicated that a major security breach was happening somewhere in the small coastal town of Millbrook. Classified military information was being leaked, and the source appeared to be connected to the school somehow. The traditional investigation methods had failed. Adult operatives couldn't blend in with teenagers, and the usual surveillance techniques weren't working. The Pentagon needed someone who could walk the halls undetected, someone who could observe and investigate without raising suspicion. Sarah had volunteered for the mission herself. Despite being the youngest person ever promoted to admiral rank, she had proven herself countless times in situations that would have broken seasoned officers. Her photographic memory, analytical mind, and natural ability to read, people made her perfect for undercover work. But this assignment was different from commanding a naval base or coordinating international operations. This required her to pretend to be something she had never really been, a normal teenager. As she walked toward her first period class, Sarah's trained eyes took in everything around her. She noted the security cameras in the corners, the way students clustered in groups, and the subtle power dynamics that played out in teenage hierarchies. Her mission briefing had been thorough. She knew that somewhere in this building was a leak that threatened national security. Students, teachers, or staff members were somehow accessing and distributing classified information about naval operations along the coast. The bell rang and Sarah found herself in advanced chemistry class. The teacher, Mr. Cosine. Harrison was a thin man in his 40s with nervous energy and thick glasses. As Sarah introduced herself to the class, she noticed several students whispering and pointing. She had expected this. New students always attracted attention. What she hadn't expected was the particular way some of them looked at her, as if they were sizing her up for something more than typical teenage social dynamics. After chemistry came advanced mathematics, then English literature. In each class, Sarah noticed the same pattern. Certain students seemed to be watching her more closely than others. There was Jessica Chen, a quiet girl who sat in the back and typed constantly on her phone. There was Marcus Thompson, a popular athlete who kept glancing her way during discussions. And there was Amy Rodriguez, the student council president who seemed to know everything about everyone. But it was during lunch that Sarah first realized she might have a problem that went beyond her mission parameters. She sat alone at a table near the windows, eating a sandwich and observing the cafeteria dynamics, when 3 students approached her. They moved with the confidence of people who were used to getting their way. The leader was a tall, blonde girl named Madison Pierce. Sarah had already identified her as one of the most influential students in school, the kind of person who could make or break someone's reputation with a few words. Flanking Madison were 2 other girls, Emma Walsh and Sophie Turner, who seemed to follow Madison's lead in everything. Madison slid into the seat across from Sarah without being invited. Her smile was perfectly practiced, the kind that looked friendly from a distance but carried undertones that only the target could fully appreciate. "So you're the new girl," Madison said, her voice carrying just far enough that nearby tables could hear. "Sarah Martinez, right? I heard your dad got transferred here for some boring military job." Sarah nodded, keeping her expression neutral. "That's right. We move around a lot." "How interesting," Emma chimed in, though her tone suggested she found it anything but interesting. "Military families are so transient, never really belonging anywhere." Sophie laughed, a sound that was meant to seem casual but felt calculated. "I bet you've never stayed anywhere long enough to make real friends." That must be so lonely. This was a probing attack, designed to establish dominance and test her reactions. In military terms, it was reconnaissance before a full assault. Madison and her friends were the school's equivalent of a special forces unit, and they had decided Sarah was a threat that needed to be neutralized. "I've gotten used to it," Sarah replied calmly. "You learn to adapt pretty quickly when you move around." Madison's eyes narrowed slightly. "Especially when you're trying to fit into an established social structure. Some people think they can just show up and change things, but that never works out well." The threat was clear, though disguised in the language of teenage social politics. Madison was letting Sarah know that she had two choices: submit to the existing hierarchy or face the consequences. "I'm just here to finish school and graduate," Sarah said. "I'm not looking to change anything." "Good," Madison said, standing up, "because change can be very difficult for everyone involved. I hope you'll remember that." As the three girls walked away, Sarah felt a familiar sensation, the calm focus that came over her before a battle. She had faced down enemy commanders, negotiated with hostile foreign agents, and coordinated military operations under fire. But somehow, these teenagers felt like a different kind of challenge. The rest of the lunch period passed quietly, but Sarah noticed that other students were watching the interaction with Madison's group. Some looked sympathetic, others seemed afraid, and a few appeared to be taking notes. Literally. She made mental note of who was paying attention and how they reacted. Her afternoon classes revealed more pieces of the puzzle. In government class, she noticed that several students had remarkably detailed knowledge about military protocols and procedures. When the teacher, Mrs. Patterson, mentioned naval operations in passing, Marcus Thompson made a comment about submarine movements that was far too specific for a civilian teenager to know casually. During English class, while discussing themes of power and secrecy in literature, Amy Rodriguez made references to classified communication methods that should have been impossible for her to know about. When Sarah caught her eye, Amy smiled innocently, but there was something calculating behind the expression. By the time the final bell rang, Sarah had identified at least 6 students who seemed to know more than they should about military operations. The problem was, she couldn't determine if they were the source of the leaks or if they were receiving information from someone else. As students filed out of the building, Sarah lingered in the hallway pretending to organize her backpack while actually observing traffic patterns and identifying potential surveillance opportunities. That's when she overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. Madison was talking to Emma near the lockers, speaking in low tones that wouldn't carry far. But Sarah's training included advanced surveillance techniques, and she had learned to read lips as well as she could hear. "The new girl is going to be a problem," Madison was saying. "There's something different about her. Did you see how she handled herself at lunch? Most new students would have been intimidated." "What do you want to do about it?" Emma replied. "We need to find out what her deal is," Madison said. "And if she won't fall in line voluntarily, we'll have to make her understand how things work around here." "Should we bring in the others?" Emma asked. Madison nodded. "Get Marcus and Amy, and tell Jessica to do some research on our new friend. I want to know everything about Sarah Martinez and her family." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. These students weren't just typical high school bullies. They were operating with a level of organization and purpose that suggested something much more serious was happening. As she walked to the parking lot where her cover identity's guardian was supposed to pick her up, Sarah's mind raced through the implications. Her mission was to investigate potential security leaks, but she had stumbled into what appeared to be an organized network of students who not only had access to classified information, but were actively targeting anyone who might threaten their operations. The guardian picking her up was actually Agent Thompson from her support team. He looked like a tired father coming to collect his daughter from school, but Sarah knew he was armed and trained in 6 different forms of combat. "How was your first day, honey?" he asked loudly enough for other students to hear. "Interesting, Dad," Sarah replied, playing her role. "I think I'm going to learn a lot here." As they drove away from the school, Sarah's mind was already working on her next moves. She needed to investigate the students she had identified without blowing her cover. She needed to determine how they were accessing classified information and what they were doing with it. And most importantly, she needed to do all of this while dealing with what appeared to be a sophisticated campaign of intimidation designed to neutralize her before she could discover the truth. That evening, in the secure communications room of her real command center, Sarah reviewed the intelligence files on every student and staff member at Lincoln High School. The facility was disguised as a private residence in an upscale neighborhood, but beneath the ordinary exterior was one of the most advanced intelligence operations on the East Coast. The files painted an interesting picture. Madison Pierce's father worked for a military contracting company with access to classified materials. Marcus Thompson's mother was a retired Navy communications officer. Amy Rodriguez had an older brother serving on a nuclear submarine. Jessica Chen's parents both worked for companies with government contracts. But the connections were too obvious, too clean. Either this was the most transparent security breach in history, or someone was very good at creating false trails and misdirection. Sarah's secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message from her Pentagon liaison. Additional intelligence suggests threat level may be higher than initially assessed. Proceed with extreme caution. Remember, you are the primary asset in this operation. As she prepared for her second day at Lincoln High School, Sarah realized that her mission had become much more complicated than a simple investigation. She was walking into what might be a carefully constructed trap, surrounded by teenagers who seemed to know exactly who she was and what she represented. But Sarah Martinez hadn't become the youngest admiral in Navy history by backing down from challenges. If Madison Pierce and her network thought they could intimidate or manipulate her, they were about to learn that they had seriously underestimated their target. The next morning dawned gray and cold, with fog rolling in from the ocean. As Sarah walked through the school's front doors, she could feel eyes on her from every direction. The word had spread overnight. The new girl was interesting. Different, potentially dangerous to the established order. What none of them knew was that the new girl was about to turn their world upside down, because Admiral Sarah Martinez was done observing and ready to engage. The only question was whether her enemies would realize what they were dealing with before it was too late. Sarah's second day at Lincoln High School began with a calculated risk. Instead of trying to blend into the background, she decided to draw more attention to herself. Sometimes the best way to investigate a network was to make them come to you. She arrived early and positioned herself in the main hallway, where students gathered before first period. When Madison Pierce and her group appeared, Sarah was ready. As they approached their usual spot near the trophy case, Sarah accidentally bumped into Madison, causing the blonde girl to drop her expensive phone. "I'm so sorry," Sarah exclaimed, immediately bending to pick up the device. In the split second she held the phone, her trained fingers felt for hidden modifications. Extra ports, unusual weight distribution, anything that might suggest it had been modified for specialized communications. Madison snatched the phone back with more force than necessary. "Watch where you're going," she snapped, but her eyes were studying Sarah's face intently. "Again, I'm really sorry," Sarah said, adding just enough nervousness to her voice to seem genuine. "I'm still getting used to how crowded it gets in here." Emma and Sophie flanked Madison like bodyguards, their expressions hostile. But Sarah noticed something interesting. Marcus Thompson was watching the interaction from across the hallway, and he looked concerned rather than amused. When their eyes met briefly, he looked away quickly, almost guiltily. "Just be more careful," Madison said finally. "Some things are more fragile than they appear." The warning was clearly about more than the phone. As the group walked away, Sarah noticed Madison immediately checking her device, running her fingers over it as if looking for damage or evidence of tampering. First period chemistry proved more revealing than Sarah had expected. Mr. Harrison was discussing molecular structures when Jessica Chen raised her hand. "Mr. Harrison, could you explain how certain chemical compounds might interfere with electronic surveillance equipment? I'm writing a paper about industrial espionage for my college application." The question was too specific, too well-informed for a casual student inquiry. Sarah watched as several other students perked up with interest, including Marcus Thompson and Amy Rodriguez. Mr. Wade Harrison seemed flustered by the question, but launched into a detailed explanation that revealed his own extensive knowledge of surveillance countermeasures. After class, Sarah lingered to ask Harrison about the homework assignment. While they talked, she noticed a small device attached to the underside of his desk, something that looked like a USB drive, but with modifications she recognized as military-grade encryption hardware. "Harrison," she said casually, "that's an interesting device you have there. Is it for grading software? The teacher's face went pale. What device? I don't know what you mean. Oh, sorry, Sarah backtracked quickly. I thought I saw something under your desk. My mistake. But Harrison was already moving to block her view of the desk. You should get to your next class, he said tersely. The halls can be dangerous when you're not paying attention. Another threat, delivered with the same underlying message as Madison's warning. Sarah was beginning to understand that she had walked into something much larger and more dangerous than a simple information leak. During lunch, instead of sitting alone, Sarah approached a table of students who seemed to exist on the periphery of the school's social hierarchy. They were the kind of kids who noticed things but weren't considered important enough to worry about. Mind if I sit here? She asked. A girl with bright purple hair and multiple piercings looked up. You sure you want to? Madison Pierce has been telling everyone you're persona non grata. I'm Zoe, the girl continued. And yeah, I heard about yesterday's cafeteria encounter. You either have guts or you're incredibly naive. Maybe a little of both, Sarah said, sitting down. What can you tell me about Madison and her friends? Zoe exchanged glances with the other students at the table. A quiet boy named David and twin sisters who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. You really are new, aren't you? Zoe said. Madison doesn't just run the social scene here. She runs everything. Student council votes go her way. Teachers mysteriously change grades when she asks. Even the principal seems afraid of her. That's a lot of power for a high school student, Sarah observed. Yeah, well, her daddy has connections, David spoke up for the first time. Pierce Defense Contractors. They supply equipment to military bases all along the coast. Sarah's pulse quickened. What kind of equipment? All kinds, Zoe said. Communications, security systems, surveillance gear. Supposedly, it's all super classified stuff. And Madison knows about her father's business? Sarah asked. The twins finally spoke up, finishing each other's sentences as they often did. Madison knows everything, about everything that matters, in this town. But here's the weird part. Zoe leaned in closer. About 6 months ago, everything changed. Madison went from being just another rich, popular girl to being, I don't know how to describe it, dangerous. What happened 6 months ago? Nobody knows for sure, David said. But there were rumors about some kind of security incident at one of the military facilities. After that, Madison started acting different. More confident, more calculating. Sarah filed this information away carefully. 6 months ago would align perfectly with when the intelligence leaks had first been detected. The conversation was interrupted when Marcus Thompson appeared at their table. Up close, Sarah could see he was nervous, almost agitated. Sarah, right? He said. Could I talk to you for a minute? Privately? Zoe raised an eyebrow. Careful, new girl. Marcus is part of Madison's inner circle. But something in Marcus's expression made Sarah curious. Sure, she said, standing up. They walked to an empty corner of the cafeteria. Marcus looked around nervously before speaking. Look, I don't know what you're really doing here, he said quietly. But you need to be careful. Madison and the others, they're not just high school kids playing games. What do you mean? Marcus hesitated, clearly struggling with something. I can't say too much, but there are things happening at this school that go way beyond normal teenage drama. People who cross Madison don't just get socially ostracized. They disappear. Disappear, transfer schools suddenly, have family emergencies, get expelled for things they didn't do. Last year, a guy named Tom Bradley started asking questions about why certain students seemed to know things they shouldn't. 3 days later, his family moved across the country because his dad got suddenly transferred for work. Sarah's training kicked in. Marcus was exhibiting classic signs of someone who wanted to reveal information but was afraid of the consequences. Why are you telling me this? Because I think you might be one of the good guys, Marcus said. And because I'm tired of being scared all the time. Before Sarah could respond, Amy Rodriguez appeared beside them. Marcus, Madison's looking for you, she said sweetly. But her eyes were cold as ice. We were just talking, Marcus said, but his voice had lost its conviction. I'm sure you were, Amy replied. Sarah, Madison would like to see you after school. She has a proposition that might interest you. What kind of proposition? Amy's smile was perfectly crafted and completely empty. the kind that determines how the rest of your time at Lincoln High School goes. As Amy walked away, Marcus grabbed Sarah's arm gently. "Whatever she offers you," he whispered urgently, "don't accept it. And whatever you do, don't go anywhere alone with them." The afternoon classes passed in a blur of tension and observation. Sarah noticed that several students were now openly watching her, and not in the casual way that new students typically attracted attention. This felt like surveillance. In government class, Mrs. Patterson was discussing the principles of military command structure when she made an offhand comment about the challenges of maintaining security in coastal defense installations. Several students immediately looked at Sarah to gauge her reaction. "Miss Martinez," Mrs. Patterson said suddenly, "given your father's military background, what's your perspective on the balance between operational security and public transparency?" It was a loaded question, designed to test how much Sarah knew about military operations. Every student in the class was now staring at her intently. "I think," Sarah said carefully, "that security has to be the priority. But people in positions of responsibility have to remember that they're serving something bigger than themselves." Mrs. Patterson nodded approvingly, but Sarah noticed that several students were taking notes. Amy Rodriguez was typing rapidly on her phone, and Jessica Chen was recording the conversation on a small device she tried to keep hidden. After class, Mrs. Patterson asked Sarah to stay behind. When the room was empty, the teacher's demeanor changed completely. "Miss Martinez, I think we both know that you're not just another student," she said quietly. Sarah's hand moved instinctively to where her concealed radio would be, but she forced herself to remain calm. "I'm not sure what you mean. Your answers in class show a level of understanding about military operations that goes far beyond what a typical military dependent would have," Mrs. Patterson continued. "Your situational awareness is too good. Your questions are too precise." "Mrs. Patterson, I'm not your enemy," the teacher interrupted, "but you need to understand what you've walked into. This school is at the center of something much bigger than you realize. Students here have access to information they shouldn't have, and they're using it in ways that could compromise national security." Sarah made a split-second decision to partially drop her cover. "What do you know?" "I know that classified information about naval operations has been circulating among certain students for months. I know that some of them have connections to families with security clearances. And I know that anyone who tries to investigate gets neutralized very quickly. Are you part of it?" Mrs. Patterson shook her head. "I'm trying to stop it. But I'm just one teacher, and they have resources I can't compete with. When I heard you were coming, I hoped what? That finally someone with real authority was going to do something about this situation."
Sarah studied the woman's face, looking for signs of deception. Her training had taught her to trust her instincts, and every instinct told her that Mrs.
Patterson was genuinely frightened. "What can you tell me about Madison Pierce's group specifically?" "They're not the leaders," Mrs. Patterson said. "They're the enforcers. The real power is coming from somewhere else, but I haven't been able to figure out where." "What about the teachers?" Mr. Harrison seemed nervous when I asked about his equipment. Mrs. Patterson's face darkened. "Harrison's compromised. I don't know if he's working with them willingly or if they have something on him, but he's definitely feeding them information." "What kind of information?" "Student records, security protocols, staff schedules, anything that would help them identify potential threats to their operation." The conversation was interrupted by a soft knock on the door. Amy Rodriguez peered in with her perpetual smile. "Sorry to interrupt, Mrs. Patterson, but Madison is ready to meet with Sarah now." Sarah looked at Mrs. Patterson, who gave an almost imperceptible shake of her head. But Sarah had already decided. She needed to see what Madison's proposition was, even if it meant walking into danger. "I'll be right there," Sarah said. As she gathered her things, Mrs. Patterson whispered, "Remember what I told you. And be very careful who you trust." Sarah followed Amy through the nearly empty hallways to a classroom on the third floor that she hadn't seen before. Inside, Madison Pierce sat behind the teacher's desk like she owned the place. Emma and Sophie flanked the door, and Marcus Thompson stood near the windows looking uncomfortable. "Sarah," Madison said warmly, as if they were old friends, "please, sit down. We have so much to talk about. I prefer to stand, thanks. What did you want to discuss?" Madison's smile faltered slightly. I think we got off on the wrong foot yesterday. I'd like to offer you an opportunity to become part of something special here at Lincoln High. What kind of opportunity? The chance to be on the inside instead of the outside, Madison said. To have access to information and resources that most students can only dream about. And what would I have to do in return? Madison stood and walked around the desk, moving closer to Sarah. Just be part of the team. Follow the established protocols. Don't ask unnecessary questions. What kind of protocols? The kind that keep everyone safe and successful, Emma said from her position by the door. Sarah realized that the three girls had positioned themselves to block the exits. Marcus caught her eye and gave another subtle shake of his head. Here's what I think, Sarah said calmly. I think you're running some kind of information network using students with family connections to military contractors and personnel. I think you've been accessing classified information and using it for purposes that have nothing to do with high school. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Madison's mask of friendliness completely disappeared. That's a very serious accusation, Madison said softly. The kind of accusation that could get someone in a lot of trouble. I'm sure it could, Sarah replied, but I'm not easily intimidated. Madison pulled out her phone and showed Sarah the screen. It displayed a photograph of the house where Sarah's cover identity supposedly lived, along with detailed information about her fictional family. Everyone can be intimidated, Madison said. It just takes the right pressure applied to the right places. Sarah looked at the photo and felt a cold anger building inside her. These students had just threatened her operation and, by extension, national security. You're right, Sarah said finally. Everyone has pressure points. Madison smiled triumphantly. I'm glad you're being reasonable. Welcome to the team, Sarah. You're going to find that being on our side has significant advantages. But Sarah wasn't finished. The question is, Madison, do you know what yours are? The smile faltered. What do you mean? Sarah pulled out her own phone and scrolled through what appeared to be a social media app, but was actually a secure military communication system. Pierce Defense Contractors. Federal investigation for potential security violations opened 3 days ago. Your father's security clearance is under review. Madison's face went white. That's impossible. How could you possibly know that? Because, Madison, you're not the only one with access to classified information. The difference is mine is legitimate. Emma and Sophie moved closer, but Marcus stepped between them and Sarah. I think, Sarah said calmly, it's time we had a real conversation about what's been happening at this school. And I think you're going to find that your little network just picked a fight with someone who has much bigger resources than you imagined. Madison's phone buzzed with an incoming message. She looked at it, and her expression shifted from anger to something approaching fear. This conversation isn't over, she said finally. No, Sarah agreed. It's just beginning, and next time, we're going to talk about exactly how you've been accessing classified naval intelligence. All of you. As she walked toward the door, Marcus fell into step beside her. That was either very brave or very stupid, he whispered. Probably both, Sarah admitted. But sometimes you have to stop pretending and start fighting. Outside the classroom, Sarah's mind was already working on her next moves. The mission parameters had changed completely. She was no longer just investigating a security leak. She was in the middle of a complex operation that involved students, teachers, and potentially people with high-level security clearances. But Admiral Sarah Martinez had faced worse odds before, and now that the opening moves were complete, it was time to show Madison Pierce and her network exactly what they were dealing with. The real battle was about to begin. The escalation came faster than Sarah had expected. By the next morning, it was clear that Madison Pierce had decided to move from subtle intimidation to direct warfare. Sarah arrived at school to find her locker vandalized with spray paint. The words "transfer student equal terrorist threat" were scrawled across the metal door in red letters. A crowd had gathered to stare, and several students were recording the scene with their phones. But Sarah's trained eye noticed something more concerning than teenage vandalism. The security cameras that should have captured whoever did this had been carefully repositioned overnight. The positioning wasn't random, it was professional, done by someone with knowledge of surveillance blind spots. Principal Collins appeared within minutes, his face flushed with embarrassment and anger. Miss Martinez, I am so sorry about this. We'll find whoever did this, and they'll face serious consequences. It's fine, Sarah said calmly, already analyzing the handwriting and paint application technique. These things happen. No, they don't, Collins insisted. Not at my school. I'm ordering a full investigation. Madison Pierce appeared at the edge of the crowd, her face the picture of concerned innocence. Oh my goodness, Sarah. This is terrible. Who would do something so awful? The performance was good, but Sarah noticed that Madison's shoes had tiny specks of red paint on them. Either Madison was getting sloppy, or she wanted Sarah to know who was responsible. I have no idea, Sarah replied, meeting Madison's eyes directly. But I'm sure the truth will come out eventually. Truth has a way of doing that, Madison agreed. Sometimes when people least expect it. The crowd began to disperse as the bell rang for first period. As Sarah cleaned her locker, Marcus Thompson appeared beside her with a rag and some cleaning solution. You don't have to help, Sarah said. Yes, I do, Marcus replied quietly. This is partially my fault. I should have warned you more clearly about what they're capable of. How are they capable of, Marcus? He looked around nervously before answering. More than you think. Last semester, a transfer student named David Kim started asking questions about why certain kids seemed to know about things happening at the naval base before they were announced publicly. 3 days later, someone planted drugs in his backpack. He got expelled and his family had to move because of the scandal. And you think Madison was behind it? I know she was. I was there when she planned it. Sarah stopped cleaning and studied Marcus's face. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm tired of being part of something that's gotten so out of control, Marcus said. It started as just sharing information between kids whose parents worked in defense. We thought we were being clever, staying informed about things that might affect our families, but it became something else? Marcus nodded grimly. About 6 months ago, Madison came back from some kind of family trip, acting completely different. Suddenly, she had access to information that none of us should have been able to get. Not just general stuff about military operations, but specific details about submarine movements, personnel transfers, security protocols. Where was she getting it? That's what I've been trying to figure out. But anyone who asks too many questions gets targeted for elimination. Elimination? Expelled, transferred, discredited, or worse, Marcus said. There was a teacher last year who started investigating, Mr. Peterson from the history department. He had a car accident on his way home one night. Nothing was ever proven, but the accident happened right after he started asking questions about student access to classified information. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. Marcus, are you saying that people might be getting hurt over this? I'm saying that whatever Madison is involved in now, it's not just high school games anymore. There are adults involved, people with real power and resources. What adults? Before Marcus could answer, Amy Rodriguez appeared around the corner. Marcus, Madison wants to see you right now. Marcus's face went pale. Tell her I'll be there in a minute. She said right now, Amy insisted, her tone carrying an unmistakable threat. Marcus looked at Sarah with genuine fear in his eyes. Be careful, he whispered, then walked away with Amy. Sarah finished cleaning her locker and headed to first period, her mind racing through the implications of what Marcus had told her. If his information was accurate, then the situation was much more dangerous than her initial briefing had suggested. This wasn't just a security leak. It might be an organized operation involving adults with access to classified materials. In chemistry class, Mr. Harrison seemed more nervous than usual. He kept glancing at Sarah throughout his lecture, and she noticed that the encrypted device she had spotted under his desk was no longer there. Miss Martinez, Harrison said as students were packing up to leave, could you stay after class for a moment? When the room was empty, Harrison locked the door and turned to face her. His hands were shaking. I don't know who you really are, he said quietly, but you need to stop whatever you're doing before someone gets hurt. Mr. Calls ought to be hurt. Harrison, I'm just a student. No, you're not, he interrupted. Students don't ask the kinds of questions you've been asking. They don't notice the kinds of things you've been noticing. Sarah decided to take a calculated risk. What things have I been noticing? Harrison pulled out a small recording device. This conversation is being monitored. he said, speaking clearly toward the device. I want that on record. Then he moved closer to Sarah and whispered so quietly that she could barely hear him. The device you saw under my desk, the questions about surveillance countermeasures, the way you analyzed the security cameras after your locker was vandalized. What do you know about my locker? I know it was done by professionals trying to make it look like amateur vandalism. I know the cameras were repositioned by someone with training in surveillance systems. And I know that you recognized all of this immediately. Sarah studied Harrison's face, trying to determine if he was ally or enemy. Why are you telling me this? Because I think you might be my way out. Harrison said, I never meant for any of this to happen. They approached me 6 months ago with what seemed like a simple request. They said they needed access to student records for a legitimate investigation. Who approached you? I can't tell you that while we're being recorded, Harrison said, glancing at the device. But I can tell you that it started small and grew into something I couldn't control. What kind of something? Harrison's voice was barely audible. They're using the students to test security protocols at military installations. The kids don't even know what they're really doing. They think they're just sharing information and playing power games. Sarah felt her blood run cold. Testing security protocols how? By seeing what classified information they can access and distribute without being detected. The students with family connections to military personnel and contractors are perfect assets. They can ask questions and request information that would raise red flags if adults tried to get the same data. And Madison Pierce is coordinating this? Madison is just the local coordinator. There are similar operations running at schools near other military installations along the coast. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. This wasn't just about Lincoln High School. It was a coordinated intelligence operation using teenagers as unknowing assets to probe military security systems. Harrison, Sarah said carefully, how do I know you're telling me the truth? He pulled out his phone and showed her a series of encrypted messages. Because I've been documenting everything, hoping that someday I could find someone with the authority to stop it. Sarah scanned the messages quickly. They contained detailed instructions for accessing student records, lists of families with security clearances, and requests for specific types of classified information. I need copies of these, Sarah said. I can't do that here, Harrison replied. It's too dangerous. But if you meet me tonight, I can give you everything I have. Where? The old pier behind the lighthouse, 11 o'clock. Come alone and make sure you're not followed. The bell rang for next period, and Harrison quickly put away his phone and recording device. Remember, he said loudly for any listening devices, the assignment is due Friday. No extensions. As Sarah left the classroom, her mind was already working on how to handle this development. If Harrison was telling the truth, then her mission had just expanded exponentially. She wasn't just dealing with a local security breach. She was uncovering a network that could be operating at multiple sensitive locations. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of classes and observations. Sarah noticed that several students were now openly following her, not even trying to be subtle about their surveillance. Madison's network was either getting careless or they wanted her to know she was being watched. During lunch, instead of sitting with Zoe and her friends, Sarah deliberately chose a table in the center of the cafeteria where she could be seen by everyone. She pulled out a notebook and began writing what appeared to be a diary entry but was actually an encrypted report to her Pentagon handlers. Within minutes, Amy Rodriguez appeared at her table. What are you writing? She asked with false casualness. Just some thoughts about my new school, Sarah replied. I like to keep a journal when we move to new places. That's so sweet, Amy said, sitting down uninvited. What kind of thoughts? Oh, just observations about the social dynamics, the teachers, the different groups of students. Sarah said, for instance, I've noticed that some students seem to have access to information that others don't. Amy's smile became strained. What do you mean? Well, in government class yesterday, several students demonstrated knowledge about military operations that seemed pretty advanced for high school level, Sarah said. It made me wonder if some families share more information about their work than others do. Military families tend to be pretty open with their kids, Amy said carefully. True, Sarah agreed. But there's a difference between general knowledge and specific operational details. Amy's phone buzzed and she glanced at it quickly. I should go, she said, standing up abruptly. Maybe we can continue this conversation later. I'd like that, Sarah said sweetly. I find these topics fascinating. As Amy walked away, Sarah noticed that she immediately pulled out her phone and started typing rapidly. Within seconds, Madison Pierce was looking in Sarah's direction from across the cafeteria. The afternoon brought a new development that confirmed Sarah's growing suspicions. In advanced mathematics, Mrs. Patrick occurred as Mrs. Patrick occurred. Rodriguez was teaching probability theory when she posed a hypothetical problem about calculating the likelihood of intercepting encrypted communications. Let's say you have a transmission system with multiple encryption layers. Mrs. Claris followed. Rodriguez said, "If you know the frequency patterns and have access to partial decryption keys, how would you calculate the probability of successful message interception?" The problem was far too specific and advanced for a typical high school math class. Several students immediately began working on calculations that demonstrated familiarity with actual military encryption systems. Sarah raised her hand. "Mrs. Rodriguez, this seems like a very specialized application of probability theory. Where might students encounter this type of problem in real life?" The teacher's face flushed slightly. "It's just a theoretical exercise, Miss Martinez. Sometimes it's good to apply mathematical concepts to real-world scenarios." "Of course," Sarah agreed, "but I'm curious about the specific parameters you've chosen. The frequency patterns and encryption layers you've described match systems used in naval communications." Several students stopped working and looked up with interest. Rodriguez looked increasingly uncomfortable. "I'm sure any resemblance to actual systems is purely coincidental," she said quickly. "I'm sure it is," Sarah replied. "It's just interesting how often coincidences like that seem to happen around here." After class, Sarah lingered in the hallway and watched as several students approached Mrs. Rodriguez with additional questions about the problem. She recognized Marcus Thompson, Jessica Chen, and two other students whose families her background research had identified as having military connections. The pattern was becoming clear. Teachers with access to classified information were using classroom exercises to train students in techniques that could be used to compromise military communications. The students probably thought they were just learning advanced concepts, not realizing they were being prepared to serve as intelligence assets. Sarah's secure phone vibrated with a coded message from her command center. Emergency extraction protocols were being put in place. Her handlers had intercepted communications suggesting that her cover might be compromised. But Sarah made a decision that went against her training and direct orders. She deleted the message without responding. She couldn't extract now, not when she was on the verge of uncovering something that could affect national security at multiple locations. As school ended, Sarah noticed that her surveillance had increased dramatically. At least 6 students were now following her at various distances, and she spotted 2 adults in vehicles parked near the school who were definitely not parents waiting for children. The operation was escalating quickly, and Sarah realized that tonight's meeting with But Harrison might be her last chance to gather the intelligence she needed before the situation became too dangerous to continue. But as she walked toward the exit, Madison Pierce appeared in front of her with a smile that looked more like a predator's grin. "Sarah, we need to talk," Madison said. "Right now." "I'm kind of in a hurry," Sarah replied. "I'm afraid I have to insist," Madison said. Behind her, Emma and Sophie emerged from alcoves where they had been waiting. Sarah counted at least 8 students now surrounding her in the hallway. The extraction protocols suddenly seemed much more appealing, but it was too late for that now. "Fine," Sarah said. "Let's talk." But she knew this conversation would be different from their previous encounters. The gloves were off now, and both sides were done pretending to be ordinary high school students. The real confrontation was about to begin, and Sarah realized she might be walking into a trap from which even her military training couldn't save her. Madison led Sarah to the same third-floor classroom where their previous confrontation had taken place, but this time the atmosphere was completely different. The room had been transformed into what looked like a command center. Multiple laptops were running, displaying what appeared to be surveillance feeds from around the school. Communication equipment that definitely didn't belong in a high school was set up on the side tables. "Impressive setup," Sarah said, maintaining her calm demeanor while her mind rapidly assessed the situation. "We've moved beyond pretending," Madison replied. "I think you can appreciate that." 8 students were now in the room, but Sarah noticed that Marcus Thompson wasn't among them. She filed that information away as potentially significant. Before we continue, Madison said, I think it's time for proper introductions. My name is Madison Pierce, and I coordinate intelligence gathering operations for this sector. Emma Walsh handles communications and surveillance. Sophie Turner manages operational security. Amy Rodriguez oversees recruitment and asset management. Jessica Chen is our technical specialist. Sarah looked around the room with new understanding. These weren't just teenagers playing spy games. They were organized, equipped, and operating with a level of sophistication that suggested extensive adult supervision and training. And you think I'm what, exactly? Sarah asked. We think you're a federal agent sent to investigate our operations, Madison said directly. The question is, what agency do you work for, and how much do your handlers know about what we're doing? Sarah made a calculated decision. The pretense was over, and continuing to claim she was just a student would only waste time and potentially put her in more danger. I'm impressed, she said. You're right that I'm not just a student, but I think you're underestimating the scope of what you're dealing with. Madison's eyes narrowed. Meaning what? Meaning that your little operation has attracted attention from levels of government that you probably haven't considered, Sarah replied. Naval intelligence doesn't send high school students to investigate security breaches. Naval intelligence, Emma repeated, exchanging glances with the others. That's right, Sarah said. Your network has been compromising classified naval communications for months. Did you really think nobody would notice? Madison's confident expression faltered slightly. We've been very careful about operational security. Not careful enough, Sarah said. Every encrypted message you've intercepted, every classified document you've accessed, every security protocol you've tested, it's all been monitored and tracked back to its source. This was partially true. Sarah's command center had indeed been tracking the information leaks, but they hadn't yet identified the full scope of the network until her investigation. You're lying, Sophie said, but her voice carried uncertainty. Sarah pulled out her phone and displayed what appeared to be a social media app, but was actually her secure communication interface. Jessica, you're the technical specialist. Take a look at this. Jessica approached cautiously and examined the phone. Her face went pale as she recognized the sophisticated encryption and communication protocols displayed on the screen. This isn't standard government issue, Jessica whispered to Madison. This is military-grade tactical communications equipment disguised as civilian technology. Which means, Sarah continued, that you're not dealing with a routine federal investigation. You're dealing with a coordinated military operation designed to neutralize threats to national security. Madison regained her composure. That would be very impressive, except for one small problem. We know exactly who you are. She nodded to Amy, who connected a laptop to the room's projection system. A detailed dossier appeared on the wall, complete with photographs and documents. Sarah Martinez, Amy read from the file. Age 17. Father is Staff Sergeant Miguel Martinez, currently stationed at Camp Lejeune. Mother is Dr. Elena Martinez, civilian contractor for defense logistics. Standard military family with appropriate clearances and background checks. Except, Madison continued, Staff Sergeant Martinez was deployed to overseas operations 6 months ago. Dr. Martinez died in a car accident 3 years ago. And the family that's supposedly living in the house where you claim to reside doesn't actually exist. Sarah felt a cold realization wash over her. Their intelligence on her background was more thorough than it should have been possible for teenagers to obtain. So the question becomes, Madison said, walking closer, who are you really? And how did you get access to military communications equipment that most government agencies don't even know exists? The room was silent, except for the humming of the electronic equipment. Sarah realized she had underestimated her opponents. They weren't just students being manipulated by adults. They were trained operatives themselves. You want to know who I really am? Sarah said quietly. We insist, Madison replied. Sarah took a deep breath and made a decision that would either end the mission or change everything. My name is Admiral Sarah Martinez. I command naval intelligence operations for the Eastern Seaboard. I'm 17 years old, and I'm the youngest person ever to hold flag rank in the United States Navy. The silence in the room was complete. Several students exchanged disbelieving glances. "That's impossible," Emma said. "A 17-year-old can't be an admiral." "Under normal circumstances, you'd be right," Sarah said. "But these aren't normal circumstances. I was promoted through accelerated advancement protocols after demonstrating exceptional capabilities in intelligence analysis and operational planning." "Prove it," Jessica demanded. Sarah held up her phone and activated a secure video conference protocol. Within seconds, the wall display showed a secure communication channel connecting directly to the Pentagon. A middle-aged woman in a Navy uniform appeared on the screen. "Admiral Martinez, this is an unexpected communication. Is your operational status secure?" "Negative, Admiral Chen," Sarah replied. "My cover has been compromised and I'm currently in the presence of the targets. I'm requesting authorization to fully disclose operational parameters." Several students gasped audibly. Madison's face had gone completely white. "Authorization granted," Admiral Chen replied. "You have full disclosure authority. Good luck, Admiral." The connection ended, and Sarah turned to face the room full of stunned teenagers. "Admiral Patricia Chen, Commander of Naval Intelligence," Sarah said calmly. "She's my direct superior and the person who authorized this mission." Madison finally found her voice. "This is impossible. You're telling us that the Navy sent a teenage admiral to investigate our operation?" "I volunteered for the mission," Sarah corrected, "because traditional investigation methods weren't working. Adult operatives couldn't blend in at a high school, and remote surveillance wasn't providing the intelligence we needed." "But how is any of this possible?" Amy asked. "How can you be 17 and an admiral?" "Because I was recruited by Naval Intelligence when I was 14 after demonstrating exceptional capabilities in computer science and strategic analysis," Sarah explained. "I completed accelerated military training while maintaining the appearance of being a normal student. By age 16, I was coordinating intelligence operations across multiple time zones. The promotion to admiral came after I successfully prevented a major security breach at a nuclear submarine facility." Jessica was frantically typing on her laptop. "I'm running background checks on everything she's saying," she announced. "The communication protocols, the encryption signatures, even the video call routing, it's all authentic military infrastructure." "This changes everything," Sophie whispered. But Madison was recovering from her shock and beginning to think strategically. "Actually, it doesn't change anything," she said. "If anything, it makes Sarah more valuable to our operation." "Valuable how?" "You're here to investigate a security breach, but you've discovered something much bigger than that," Madison said. "We're not the enemy you're looking for." "Explain." Madison walked to one of the laptops and pulled up a series of files. "Our operation isn't about stealing classified information or compromising national security. We're a counterintelligence network designed to identify and neutralize actual threats to military installations." Sarah studied the files displayed on the screen. They showed detailed intelligence on foreign operatives, suspicious activity near naval facilities, and what appeared to be genuine security threats. 6 months ago, Emma continued, Madison's father discovered that foreign agents were using students at schools near military bases to gather intelligence. They were targeting kids whose parents had security clearances and manipulating them into providing information. "So we created our own network to combat theirs," Amy added. "We've been identifying students who were being targeted and either recruiting them to work with us or neutralizing the threat before classified information could be compromised." "Harrison?" Sarah asked. "Is working with us," Madison said. "The device you saw under his desk was monitoring communication attempts from foreign operatives trying to recruit him as an asset." Sarah's mind raced through the implications. If this was true, then her entire understanding of the situation had been wrong. "The vandalism to my locker, the intimidation tactics, the surveillance?" she asked. "Tests," Sophie said. "We needed to determine if you were a genuine federal investigator or if you were part of the foreign operation trying to penetrate our network. And Marcus Thompson's warnings about people disappearing." "Marcus isn't fully briefed on our operation," Madison admitted. "He knows something is happening, but we couldn't risk bringing him in completely until we were sure about his reliability." Sarah pulled out her phone and began accessing classified databases. "If what you're telling me is true, then there should be records of foreign intelligence activities in this area. But they're classified at levels that most government agencies don't have access to," Lucky for you, Sarah said, I'm not most government agencies. For the next 20 minutes, Sarah cross-referenced the information Madison's team had provided with her own intelligence databases. The picture that emerged was both disturbing and impressive. A foreign intelligence network had indeed been operating at multiple schools near military installations. They had successfully recruited several students and at least 3 teachers to provide classified information. But Madison's counterintelligence operation had identified and neutralized most of the threats before serious damage could occur. Your operation has been remarkably successful, Sarah admitted. But it's also been operating without official authorization or oversight. We couldn't go through official channels, Madison said. The foreign operatives had penetrated multiple levels of local law enforcement and even some federal agencies. So you decided to handle it yourselves. We decided to protect our country and our families, Emma said. Sometimes that means operating outside normal protocols. Sarah studied the faces around her. These teenagers had taken on a mission that trained adult operatives would have found challenging, and they had succeeded in ways that impressed even her. There's one problem with your story, Sarah said finally. The room tensed. What problem? Madison asked. If you're really counterintelligence operatives protecting national security, then why did you try to intimidate me instead of bringing me into the operation from the beginning? Madison and her team exchanged glances. Because we weren't sure you were really on our side, Amy said. For all we knew, you were part of the foreign network sent to identify and eliminate our operation. And now? Now we know you're Admiral Sarah Martinez, Madison said, which means we can finally bring our operation under official oversight and get the resources and support we need to complete our mission. I'm going to contact my superiors and recommend that your network be officially authorized and integrated into ongoing counterintelligence operations. The relief in the room was palpable, but Sarah held up her hand. However, this integration comes with conditions. You'll have official handlers, regular oversight, and strict protocols about what operations you can and cannot conduct. We understand, Madison said. And, Sarah continued, you'll help me identify and neutralize any remaining foreign operatives in the area. Already working on it, Jessica said, pulling up surveillance data. We've identified 3 teachers and at least 6 students who are still working for the foreign network. How did you know I was coming? Madison smiled for the first time since the conversation had begun. Because, Admiral Martinez, we've been monitoring federal communications about security threats to this area for months. When we detected that a high-level operative was being sent to investigate, we knew it was only a matter of time before they arrived. And you figured out it was me how? Process of elimination, Emma said. We had identified every adult in town who might be an undercover operative. When you showed up as a new student with military family background, you were the only possibility left. Sarah shook her head in amazement. Remind me never to underestimate teenagers again. Does this mean we passed the test? Amy asked. You didn't just pass, Sarah said. You've redefined what the test was supposed to measure. As the meeting wound down and equipment was secured, Sarah realized that her mission had taken a direction nobody could have anticipated. Instead of uncovering a security threat, she had discovered an unauthorized but highly effective counterintelligence operation run by the very teenagers she had been sent to investigate. But the mission wasn't over yet. There were still foreign operatives to identify and neutralize. And now, for the first time in her career, Admiral Sarah Martinez would be working with a team of agents who were not only her own age, but had proven themselves to be just as capable as any adult operatives she had commanded. The next phase of the operation was going to be very interesting indeed. 3 weeks later, Lincoln High School looked exactly the same from the outside, but everything had changed underneath the surface. Sarah Martinez, no longer hiding her true identity from Madison's team, had transformed the teenagers' improvised counterintelligence operation into a sophisticated joint military-civilian network. The old classroom on the 3rd floor had been officially designated as a secure communications center, equipped with military-grade technology that allowed the student operatives to coordinate directly with Sarah's command center. What had started as a desperate attempt by teenagers to protect their families had evolved into one of the most effective counterintelligence operations in the country. Status report. Sarah said as she entered the room that had become their operational headquarters. The morning briefings had become routine, but the intelligence they were gathering was anything but routine. Madison looked up from her monitoring station. We've identified the final 3 foreign operatives in the area. 2 teachers and 1 support staff member who have been systematically gathering information about naval security protocols. Mrs. Chen from the language department, Emma added, pulling up surveillance footage. She's been using her position as coordinator for international student exchanges to facilitate communications with foreign intelligence services. Mr. Williams from maintenance, Sophie continued. His access to security systems throughout the school has allowed him to install listening devices in classrooms where students with military family connections tend to gather. And Miss Foster from the guidance counseling office, Amy concluded. She's been accessing student files to identify targets for recruitment and manipulation. Sarah reviewed the intelligence files on each suspect. The evidence was comprehensive and damning. Over the past 3 weeks, Madison's team had documented communication patterns, financial transactions, and behavior that conclusively proved these individuals were working for foreign interests. Outstanding work, Sarah said. How do you recommend we proceed with neutralization? This was the new dynamic that had emerged. While Sarah provided official oversight and military resources, she had come to rely heavily on the strategic thinking and local knowledge of the teenage operatives. They understood the school environment and social dynamics in ways that traditional military personnel never could. Coordinated action, Madison said. We expose all 3 simultaneously so none of them can warn the others or attempt to destroy evidence. The timing has to be perfect, Jessica added from her technical station. I've been monitoring their communication patterns. They're scheduled to have a coordination meeting tomorrow night at the old warehouse district. We intercept them there, Emma suggested. Away from the school so we don't disrupt the educational environment. Sarah nodded approvingly. The teenagers had learned to think not just tactically but strategically, considering the broader implications of their actions. I'll coordinate with FBI counterintelligence for the actual arrests, Sarah said, but I want your team to maintain surveillance and provide real-time intelligence during the operation. What about the students who were recruited by the foreign operatives? Amy asked. Some of them were manipulated into providing information without realizing what they were doing. This had been one of the most difficult aspects of the operation. The investigation had revealed that several students had been unknowingly compromised, providing classified information they had overheard from their families to people they thought were legitimate researchers or journalists. Rehabilitation rather than punishment, Sarah decided. These students are victims, not criminals. We'll provide them with counseling and education about security protocols, but there won't be criminal charges. What about Marcus? Sophie asked. He was partially aware of what was happening, but chose to try to protect you instead of reporting to the foreign operatives. Marcus Thompson had become a valuable asset to their team. His inside knowledge of which students had been recruited and what information they had provided had been crucial to assessing the damage from the foreign intelligence operation. Marcus gets a full briefing and an offer to continue working with us, Sarah said. He's proven his loyalty and demonstrated good judgment under pressure. The conversation was interrupted by an alert tone from Jessica's monitoring equipment. We have a problem, she announced. Mrs. Chen just sent an encrypted message to her handlers. She's requesting immediate extraction. Sarah moved to Jessica's station to review the intercepted communication. She knows we're onto her. How is that possible? Madison asked. We've been completely covert in our surveillance. Jessica was frantically typing on her keyboard. Someone tipped her off. The message references unusual student activity and possible counter-surveillance. Sarah's mind raced through the possibilities. Who else knows about this operation? Just us and your military handlers, Emma said. Unless what? Unless one of the students we thought was a victim is actually a willing collaborator, Amy said grimly. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They had assumed that all the recruited students were unwilling victims of manipulation. But if one of them was actually working voluntarily for the Foreign Intelligence Network, then their entire operation had been compromised from the beginning. Jessica, can you trace where the leak came from? Sarah asked. Already on it, Jessica replied, her fingers flying over the keyboard. I'm analyzing communication patterns from the past 48 hours, cross-referencing with student access to information about our operation. Sarah activated her secure communication link to her command center. This is Admiral Martinez. We have a potential security breach in our counterintelligence operation. Request immediate backup and extraction protocols. Admiral, came the reply, we've been monitoring the situation. FBI tactical teams are already en route to your location. ETA? 20 minutes? Sarah turned back to the team. We're going to have to accelerate our timeline. If Mrs. Chen is requesting extraction, it means the entire foreign network is preparing to disappear. What do you need us to do? Madison asked. Lock down the school, Sarah ordered. Nobody leaves until we've identified our security leak. Jessica, I need you to trace every communication that could have compromised our operation. Emma and Sophie coordinate with building security to monitor all exits. She continued. Amy, contact Marcus and get him up here. We need his perspective on who might be working voluntarily with the foreign operatives. As the team sprang into action, Sarah felt the familiar tension that came before a major operation. But this was different from commanding naval operations. These teenagers had become her partners, not just her subordinates, and she found herself trusting their judgment in ways that surprised her. Admiral, Jessica called out, I found our leak. The room gathered around Jessica's station as she displayed communication records on the main screen. The leak is coming from David Park, she announced. He's been providing detailed reports about our investigation to Mrs. Chen for the past 2 weeks. Sarah reviewed the evidence. David Park was a senior whose mother worked in naval communications. He had been identified as one of the students who had been manipulated into providing classified information to the foreign operatives. He wasn't a victim, Madison said grimly. He was a willing collaborator from the beginning. It gets worse, Jessica continued. According to these communications, David has been feeding information to the foreign network for over a year. He's not just a student asset, he's a trained operative. Sarah's secure phone buzzed with an urgent message. FBI reports that the warehouse where the meeting was supposed to take place is empty. All 3 subjects have disappeared. David must have warned them, Amy said. Where is David now? Sarah asked. Emma checked the school's security monitoring system. He's in the building, 3rd floor near the main computer lab. What's in the computer lab that would interest him? Sarah asked. The school's main server, Jessica said, her face going pale. If he has access to that, he could delete evidence of the entire foreign intelligence operation. Or worse, Madison added, he could access the personal files of every student in school and identify potential targets for future recruitment. Sarah made a command decision. We're going to intercept David ourselves. FBI backup is still 15 minutes out, and we can't wait. Are you sure that's wise? Emma asked. If David is a trained operative, he could be dangerous. That's why we're not going alone, Sarah said, activating her communication system. This is Admiral Martinez requesting immediate tactical support at Lincoln High School. We have a foreign operative attempting to access sensitive computer systems. Roger that, Admiral. Marine tactical team en route. ETA 8 minutes. Sarah turned to Madison's team. Here's what we're going to do. We surround the computer lab and contain David until the Marines arrive. But nobody engages directly unless he tries to escape or threatens civilian students. What about the other students in the building? Sophie asked. Building-wide lockdown, Sarah decided. Security will announce a drill and keep everyone in their current locations until this is resolved. As they moved through the hallways toward the computer lab, Sarah reflected on how much had changed since her first day at Lincoln High School. She had come here expecting to investigate a simple security leak. Instead, she had uncovered a complex foreign intelligence operation and gained a team of teenage operatives who had proven themselves to be remarkably capable. Contact, Emma whispered from her position near the computer lab. David is inside with 2 other individuals I don't recognize. Sarah used her tactical communication system to coordinate with the approaching Marine unit. Be advised, we have 3 subjects in the target location with unknown additional personnel. Marines are in the building. The final confrontation happened quickly. When David Park and his associates realized they were surrounded, they attempted to destroy the computer equipment they had been accessing. But Jessica had anticipated this and had already remotely backed up all the data they were trying to eliminate. The Marines took the 3 foreign operatives into custody without incident. But as David was led away in handcuffs, he looked directly at Sarah with a mixture of hatred and respect. "You're good," he said. "But this operation is bigger than just one high school. You've only found one small piece of a much larger network." "We'll see about that," Sarah replied calmly. 2 hours later, the crisis was over. The foreign operatives had been transferred to federal custody, the compromised computer systems had been secured, and the school had returned to normal operations. In the command center classroom, Sarah's team was conducting their after-action review. "David was right about one thing," Madison said. "This was definitely part of a larger operation. The communication patterns we identified suggest similar activities at schools near at least 6 other military installations, which means our work is just beginning," Sarah said. "I've received authorization to expand this operation nationwide. We'll be working with student teams at other schools to identify and neutralize foreign intelligence activities." "Are you asking us to help with that?" Amy asked. "I'm asking if you want to continue protecting your country," Sarah said. "This won't be a temporary assignment. If you agree, you'll become permanent assets of naval intelligence, with all the training, resources, and responsibilities that entails." The room was quiet for a moment as the teenagers considered the magnitude of what Sarah was offering. "What about college?" Emma asked. "Our families? Normal life?" "You'll still attend college, still have relationships with your families, still have as normal a life as possible," Sarah assured them. "But you'll also have a higher purpose and the satisfaction of knowing you're making a real difference in protecting national security." Madison spoke first. "This is more important than anything else I could do with my life." One by one, the others agreed. Emma, Sophie, Amy, and Jessica all committed to continuing their work as intelligence operatives. "What about Marcus?" Sophie asked. "Marcus gets the same offer," Sarah said. "He's proven himself to be trustworthy and capable." 6 months later, Admiral Sarah Martinez stood in the Pentagon briefing room, presenting the results of Operation High School to a room full of senior military officials. "The Teenage Counterintelligence Program has successfully identified and neutralized foreign intelligence operations at 12 high schools near sensitive military installations," she reported. "Student operatives have proven to be uniquely effective at gathering intelligence and identifying threats that traditional methods miss."
"How do you explain their effectiveness, Admiral?" asked the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
"Teenagers are naturally suspicious of adult authority figures,"
Sarah explained.
"Foreign operatives trying to recruit student assets often underestimate how much these kids actually know and how quickly they can identify when someone is trying to manipulate them." "And the program is sustainable long-term?" "Yes, sir. We've developed training protocols that allow student operatives to maintain their cover while developing sophisticated intelligence-gathering skills. Most importantly, they're motivated by a genuine desire to protect their communities and families." "What about oversight and accountability?" "Each student team is supervised by a military liaison with appropriate clearance and training," Sarah said. "Regular evaluations ensure that operatives maintain both their academic performance and their operational effectiveness." The briefing continued for another hour, but Sarah knew the program would be approved for expansion. The results spoke for themselves. That evening, Sarah returned to Lincoln High School for a reunion with her original team. They gathered in the same classroom where they had first confronted each other, but the atmosphere now was one of friendship and mutual respect. "Any regrets?" Sarah asked as they shared pizza and reviewed their latest intelligence reports. "Only one," Madison said with a grin. "I wish I had figured out who you really were on the first day. It would have saved us all a lot of trouble." "Where's the fun in that?" Sarah replied. "Besides, you needed to prove yourselves before I could trust you with the real mission." "What's the real mission?" Marcus asked. He had become one of their most valuable operatives, with a natural talent for reading people and identifying potential threats. "Protecting the country from enemies who think they can use our own young people against us," Sarah said. "Making sure that kids like you have the knowledge and tools to recognize when someone is trying to manipulate them. And making sure that when somebody targets the new girl," Madison added, "they realize they might be picking a fight with someone who has more resources than they ever imagined." Sarah looked around the room at the teenagers who had become her partners, her friends. When she had first walked into Lincoln High School, she had been the youngest admiral in Navy history, trying to solve a security problem by pretending to be something she had never really been, a normal teenager. Now she realized that she had found something even more valuable than the solution to that security problem. She had found a team of people who shared her commitment to protecting their country and who brought skills and perspectives that complemented her own. The mission was far from over. Foreign intelligence services were always looking for new ways to gather classified information and compromise national security. But Sarah was confident that her network of teenage operatives would be ready for whatever challenges came next. After all, they had already proven that when enemies targeted the new girl, they might discover they had seriously underestimated what a determined group of young Americans could accomplish when they set their minds to protecting everything they cared about. And Admiral Sarah Martinez, the youngest flag officer in Navy history, had learned that sometimes the most effective way to command was not to give orders, but to earn the trust and respect of people who chose to follow you because they believed in the mission. The future of American intelligence operations was in good hands, even if some of those hands still had to worry about homework assignments and college.